In the USSR, they knew how to build off-road vehicles, and they loved doing it. The country mastered the production of dozens of such machines, but one of them stood out above the rest: the GAZ-69. It served in the army and worked in collective farms, pushed through tropical jungles, and crossed desert sands. Simple and reliable, the GAZ-69 became, much like the Kalashnikov rifle, one of the true symbols of the Soviet Union. In this video, I'll tell you the remarkable story of this legendary machine. To begin the story of the GAZ-69, we need to start with its direct predecessor, the GAZ-67. Its history began back in 1939, when the USSR seriously considered creating its own command off-road vehicle. The first candidate was the GAZ-61, but in 1940, the plant's engine shop was handed over to the aviation industry. Automobile engines ceased to be produced, and the Army was left without the planned vehicles. No GAZ-61s, no GAZ-63 trucks, not even the armored cars that were supposed to be built on them. And then came a turning point. The head of the Red Army's Automotive and Tractor Directorate, Major General Tagunov, while leafing through the American magazine Automotive Industries, came across a note about a tiny off-roader that Ford was making for the U.S. Army. Not the Bantam, as many believe, but precisely the Ford Pygmy. The article included not only a photograph of the second prototype, but also its dimensions, weight, and power. It was the Pygmy, not the Bantam, that became the basis for the future Soviet Jeep. The myth of a copied Bantam appeared later, but it does not stand up to the facts. Grachev, the chief designer at GAZ, received the order. Make one like that, but ours. Work on the new vehicle, later designated GAZ-64, began on February 3rd in the GAZ experimental workshop. To speed up development and later production, as many components as possible from existing vehicles were used. The engine and gearbox were taken from the GAZ MM truck, with a transfer case derived from the GAZ-61. The front axle was based on the same model, but reworked with shortened half shafts and redesigned casings. Initially, when creating the Soviet analog of the Ford Pygmy, the GAZ Design Bureau proposed using the axles from the existing GAZ-61, which would have preserved the truck track width, so the vehicle could move in the same columns as the trucks. However, the main armored directorate of the Red Army insisted on parameters as close as possible to the Ford Pygmy. As a result, the front axle was indeed taken from the GAZ-61, but its half shafts and casings were shortened. The same was done with the rear axle. Field operation quickly revealed the mistake of narrowing the track width. This was especially evident on BA-64 armored cars built on the GAZ-64 chassis. The high center of gravity of these armored cars, combined with the narrow track, often caused them to tip over not only on rough ground, but even on flat roads at speeds over 30 kilometers per hour. The low skill level of frontline drivers only made matters worse. In fact, the accident rate of the BA-64 became the catalyst for the redesign of the GAZ-64. This led to the appearance of the GAZ-67, with a wider track, reinforced axles, additional shock absorbers, and new springs. It was now a true combat off-roader, proven on frontline roads and in civilian service, and it became the very foundation for the future GAZ-69. A foundation, but not the starting point, because the starting point in the lineage of the GAZ-69 goes back exactly to February 3rd, 1943. Yes, on that very day when work began on the GAZ-67, the future 69 was also set in motion. Why is this date so important? Because alongside the start of work on the 67 model, something much larger happened that day. At the People's Commissariat of Medium Machine Building, a major conference of designers from automotive plants and subcontractor enterprises was held. There, They outlined the future course of the entire Soviet automotive industry, discussed the key characteristics of post-war vehicles, and laid out the production base for them. The Gorky automobile plant was already preparing to phase out the pre-war GAZ MM and GAZ M1, and to introduce new models, the future GAZ 51 and GAZ M20 Pobeda. And it was precisely at that moment, when it became clear that the old component base would not last long, that the question naturally arose of creating a new multi-purpose off-road vehicle, based on future-proof components, but still meeting Army requirements. But to truly feel the atmosphere of that moment, you have to take a step back. Just a day before this conference, on February 2nd, 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad ended with the defeat of Paulus's Sixth Army. And then, the very next day, against the backdrop of a turning point in the war, a conference is held in Moscow where they speak about the future, about what vehicles would be needed in peacetime. It is impressive in itself. Yesterday, fierce battles. Today, planning for civilian life.
1 февраля 1943 года.
After the conference, Grigory Wasserman was appointed chief designer for the new project. He made the first sketches of the future off-roader in 1944, and by 1946, full-scale development was underway. If the previous GAZ-67 was a typical product of wartime, purely utilitarian, the new model was expected to meet peacetime demands as well. It is no coincidence that its official project name sounded like Truzhenik, meaning workhorse, though in the technical assignment it was stated plainly, a battalion artillery tractor for guns and mortars. That duality of purpose is quite telling. The first prototype was assembled in early 1948. The GAZ-69 workhorse was simple yet well thought out. A stamped frame with box section side members, a Pobeda engine with 52 horsepower, and from the same car a 3-speed gearbox, a 2-speed transfer case, live axles, leaf spring suspension, drum brakes on all wheels with hydraulic drive. In terms of off-road performance, it was no worse than the GAZ-67, and its payload increased to 500 kilograms, plus a trailer of up to 800. At the same time, it seated 8 people, twice as many as its predecessor, with the wheelbase extended by only 200 millimeters and overall length by just 500 millimeters. In the spring of 1948, this prototype was sent to accompany state trials of the GAZ-12 limousine as a support vehicle. And a year later, the GAZ-69 itself passed all state trials and was recommended for production. It is important to note, not a single component of the workhorse was a groundbreaking innovation. Cardan joints, wheel brakes, the steering mechanism, and rear shock absorbers were all taken from the Pobeda. The drive axles came from the GAZ-67B, with hubs on tapered roller bearings and fully floating half shafts. The handbrake was a central disc type from the GAZ-51, later replaced by a drum type, and from it also came the gauges and lighting equipment. This approach not only reduced production costs, but also made supplying spare parts for the country's vehicle fleet much easier. The vehicle was produced in 2 versions. The 2-door 8-seat GAZ-69, with 2 front seats and longitudinal benches along the sides of the body for 6 soldiers. When the benches were folded, it turned into a sizable cargo bay. The 4-door GAZ-69A, with a full-width rear bench instead of side benches. In the Army, this version was nicknamed the Commanders, while in civilian use, such vehicles often went to kolkhoz chairmen, rural officials, foresters, geologists, and oil workers. By the standards of its time, the GAZ-69 was considered quite respectable. In addition to its excellent off-road capabilities, it also offered decent equipment. A cabin fan and a heater were included as standard, while competitors such as the Ford M151 and the Land Rover offered heaters only as an option. Incidentally, the name Trujenik never became the official name of this off-roader. In official documents, it was simply called GAZ-69, and the workhorse name never caught on among people. What did catch on was another nickname, Kozel, or, more affectionately, Kozlik. All because the 69 hopped over bumps and potholes like a real goat. In December 1954, the assembly of off-road vehicles was organized at the Ulyanovsk automobile plant, using machine kits supplied by GAZ. 2 years later, the full production of the vehicle was transferred to UAZ. This was done with a pragmatic purpose, to offload the production capacity of GAZ, and conversely, to load the capacity of UAZ. The vehicle retained its official name, GAZ-69. It was never officially or popularly called Kozik at UAZ, even though over time, an embossed UAZ marking appeared on the hood. The GAZ-69 wasn't cheap, 14,000 Soviet rubles. For comparison, the much more comfortable Moskvich 407 cost just 2,000 more. But here was the paradox. The Moskvich was available for purchase by all citizens, shortages aside, while the GAZ-69 was not sold to private individuals. All units went exclusively through state orders. The only exception was made for Mikhail Sholokhov, who was sold a brand new 69. All other citizens could only buy this off-roader after it was written off from state enterprises. And thousands of people dreamed of owning a Kozlik, not just in villages, but also in cities. Nature lovers, hunters, fishermen, and those whose work required them to reach remote areas. But those who did manage to buy second-hand units encountered problems unfamiliar to car owners. Neither the hood, nor the doors, nor the trunk of the GAZ-69 had locks. The door issue was solved by installing at least one lock in the driver's door. The rest were secured from the inside using simple bolt latches, the same kind used in apartments on bathroom and closet doors at the time. A canvas top for a personal car in northern climates was far from ideal. So many owners made hard roofs themselves from improvised materials. There were also factory versions with hardtops, installed at specialized facilities, but not for passenger comfort, rather, to prevent passengers from escaping. There were also attempts from the factory to modernize the body by replacing the canvas with a metal roof. This led to an experimental vehicle for municipal services with rear-wheel drive only. The prototype was indexed GAZ-19, but it never reached series production and remained a one-off. But apart from rough terrain, which the GAZ-69 handled quite confidently, there were also water obstacles, and those were almost impossible for it to overcome. For example, take a look at this footage showing how they tried to find a solution to this problem, so to speak, with minimal effort. Such designs never went into mass production for a number of reasons. Instead, the Army received more capable and specialized amphibious vehicles. For example, the GAZ-46, already mentioned in this video, which was based on components from the 69 model. The prototype for the amphibian was the American Ford GPA, supplied to the USSR under the Lend-Lease program. On land, the GAZ-46 could reach speeds of up to 90 kilometers per hour, and on water, about 8 kilometers per hour. Production of the amphibians continued until 1961, but they were built not at the UAZ or the GAZ plants, but at the tracked tractor factory, simply because neither GAZ nor UAZ had sufficient production capacity available for it. After Nikita Khrushchev's visit to the plant in 1956, when he voiced the idea of creating a vehicle capable of driving where reindeer walk, another line of experiments emerged: overcoming snow obstacles. 4 experimental prototypes were built, each using a different method of traversing snow. The tracked version proved to be the most effective, but even it was not recommended for mass production, as its load-carrying capacity on snow turned out to be rather limited.
Первый – это скольжение автомобиля по снегу на лыжах и отталкивание движителями о грунт. Испытания мотосаней на снежной целине показали, что образцы, выполненные по этой схеме, имеют ограниченную проходимость по снегу. Движение мотосаней возможно только при упоре ведущих барабанов о грунт до тех пор, пока глубина снега не превышает величины максимально возможного заглубления движителя. При большей глубине мотосани вывешиваются на лыжах, а барабаны, оторвавшись от грунта, начинают буксовать. Движение при этом прекращается. Второе направление – это скольжение по снегу и отталкивание о снег. Образец с ленточным движителем, выполненный по этой схеме, показал удовлетворительную управляемость и ходовые качества по снегу любой глубины. Однако незначительная грузоподъемность мотосаней, по существу построенных на базе легкового автомобиля ГАЗ-69, не могла дать исчерпывающих данных о целесообразности повышения проходимости по снегу большегрузных автомобилей путем установки на них подобных двигателей.
Now let's move on from experiments to exports. Of course, the Kozlik was sold abroad, mostly to countries of the Eastern Bloc and other friendly nations. But there were exceptions. For example, the GAZ-69 was shipped to Iceland, which at that time was under sanctions, and other countries refused to sell new off-road vehicles there. The USSR stepped in to help, and a local dealer organized the installation of a metal roof on the GAZ-69. The result, frankly, was solid and stylish. The Icelanders were very pleased with this cooperation and later went on to import the Niva as well. In total, the GAZ-69 was exported to 56 countries around the world. Export versions carried the indexes 69M and 69AM and differed from those supplied within the USSR primarily by better build quality and more powerful engines. But some countries, like Romania and North Korea, didn't just import GAZ vehicles. They set up local assembly. The Romanian Aero M461 was a licensed version of the GAZ-69, almost indistinguishable from the original at first glance, except that its wheels looked more like those of a passenger car. They also fitted the Aero with more powerful engines, up to 80 horsepower. The production experience gained from that model was later channeled into the creation of the Aero 24, an entirely new development with little in common with the previous design. For the 1980s, it was a genuinely capable off-roader with solid potential. Meanwhile, at UAZ, they were also working on their own next-generation off-roader. Judging by the surviving prototype photos, if it had reached production, it could have found buyers in many countries, competing with both the Aero and the Niva. But, as you can guess, none of the prototypes ever made it to the assembly line. In North Korea, they produced not exactly the 69 itself, but rather a deep modernization of it, a rear-wheel drive van. By the way, you can watch a separate video about this model and other examples of North Korean automotive industry on my channel. I'll leave the link in the description. Like many Soviet vehicles, the GAZ-69 stayed on the production line for quite a long time, all the way until 1972. And this despite the fact that work on its replacement had started as early as the late 1950s. The reason why the GAZ-69 remained unchanged for so long was rather simple. The Ministry of Automotive Industry didn't have the funds to launch a new model. Besides, the main customer, the military, was perfectly satisfied with the 69. There are even stories that the new generation of UAZ appeared thanks to a real special operation. A new UAZ model, already developed to the point of being production ready, was secretly delivered from the Ulyanovsk plant to Moscow, bypassing the ministry, and presented directly to Brezhnev himself. Leonid Brezhnev, known for his passion for cars, listened with interest and personally examined the vehicle. And within that same year, it went into mass production. Of course, the new model was superior to the 69 in many ways, above all in comfort and technical solutions. But when it comes to off-road performance, there's no clear answer as to which one is better. It's more accurate to say, both are great. There were also attempts to create a successor to the 69 model. In the year 2000 at the Moscow Motor Show, an off-roader called GAZ Combat was unveiled, styled after the classic GAZ-69. Even its index underlined that connection, the 21st century and the 69 model. Of course, this vehicle never made it to production. Despite the nostalgic warmth surrounding the GAZ-69, the new model met with a mixed reaction. And although its technical foundation was solid, a proven and reliable UAZ chassis, and an Austrian Steyr diesel under the hood, the styling raised many questions. Creating a worthy remake of a legendary vehicle is no simple task, though there are successful examples. But with the Combat, it seems the designers completely missed their target audience. The prototype looked overly plastic and was painted in toy-like colors. Those who were supposed to be drawn to it didn't really understand the message. Was it a flashy pseudo-off-roader for the city streets, or a true off-road machine? Why did it look so toy-like and fake? Its grandfather was rugged, green, and made of steel, while with the Combat, even the creators themselves seemed unsure who it was for and why it existed. On top of that, the Combat appeared during a time when the Russian auto industry was churning out one odd concept car after another, so it simply felt like yet another strange prototype. But the original GAZ-69 has stood the test of time. Even in the 21st century, even in 2025, it remains in demand and is far from cheap on the market. It still commands well-deserved respect among fans of outdoor adventures, and especially off-roading. The GAZ-69 has truly stood the test of time.